Right, so we are still working on right triangles. And whenever you're working with right triangles, there's certain things you need to know. Obviously, you need to know it's going to have that little box in here. You need to know that it's going to equal 90 degrees on the box. And then you obviously need to know that the inside is going to be 180 of any triangle. And then you also need to know that this is a leg, and the long side opposite of the 90 degree is your hypotenuse. So when we're dealing with finding a missing side of a right triangle, it's always a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And the a and the b are the legs. It doesn't matter which one you choose, but your hypotenuse is always going to be the c squared. And that's what we're going to work on today. So if it gives it all to us in words, again, I'm a big believer in drawing it out. So I know I'm dealing with a right triangle because it says right triangle. And it says it has a leg length of 20. So I'm going to label this one 20 and then a hypotenuse of 33. So I know my hypotenuse has to be across from that 90 degree. It's got to be the longest side. So that's going to be 33. And it says find the length of the other leg. So this is the one that I don't know. Okay. So we need to know this is the formula we're using. And again, you need to know that your hypotenuse is always going to be the c squared. So we're going to put 33 squared. And then here I can just choose A or B. It's not going to matter. And then we simply have to solve it. Okay. So me personally, I'm going to go ahead and do the exponents first. There's a lot of reasons to that, but 20 times 20 or 20 squared is 400. Gets me b squared equals 33 squared. Again, 33 times 33 is 1089. And then this is just basically a two-step equation. We're going to subtract the 400 because we want to get that b by itself. This is why we spent so much time in algebra knowing how to solve for variables. So it gets me 689. And then we're back down to the fact that this is a b squared. So the opposite of a square is a square root. So we're going to do this and put it in the calculator. And it is going to equal 26.248. Now up here it says provide the answer accurate to the nearest tenth. So let's talk place value. Hopefully we know this is 1, 10, 100, right? This is tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And it says to round it to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to go 2 places behind. So if I take my answer and I do 26.248, I'm going to round to the nearest tenth, which means I'm going to split it right here. And then I always look at the number behind it. Is this number 5 or bigger? The answer is no. So I'm going to leave it at 26.2. If this number back here was 5 or bigger, then the tenths place just goes up by 1. That's how we round it. Okay. So again, the hundredths is not 5 or bigger. So we're simply going to leave this as 26.2. And it says the correct unit is required on the problem. So that was centimeters. So we should just be able to put cm. Let's see if it wants me to spell it out. Nope, it took it. Okay. So again, making sure we're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Anytime you're dealing with a right triangle, that's your formula. And then we need to make sure that we put the hypotenuse in the correct placement. If you do that, everything else falls through. All right, let's look at another one. So this one here, it says a right triangle has a leg of 24. So again, I'm going to draw it out. That's a leg. And then the hypotenuse of 38. So the hypotenuse has to be over here across from my 90 degree. And we're finding the other leg. So that means it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Again, c squared is always my hypotenuse. So I'm going to start there. And then I can just pick and choose which leg we're going to talk about. And then simply do the math. So 24 squared or 24 times 24 is 576. And then 38 times 38 or 38 squared is 1,444. Then again, applying what we know about equations, I need to get the variable by itself. So we're going to subtract 576. It's already in my calculator, so I'm just going to hit minus 576, and that gets me b squared equals 868. And then again, it's still b squared, so you have to do the square root sign in your calculator. And that gets me, let me put it over here, 29.461. It says to the nearest tenth again, so here's my tenths place. And again, I'm looking at the number behind it, and then I ask myself, is this number 5 or bigger? It is, so that means the 4 is going to go up by 1 digit. So it's 29.5. And again, it wants the label required. It was meters, so I can just put M. And there we go. So again, quick recap. When you're finding side lengths of a right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Your hypotenuse is your c squared. Substitute in either leg, and then solve it as we know we should. And then make sure that you round. All right, this one here, it tells me that I have a right triangle, a leg length of 23 inches, and a hypotenuse of 28. What is the other leg? So we're going to have 23 squared plus b squared equals 28 squared. Again, remember, your hypotenuse is always your c squared. That's the biggest one to make sure that you pay attention to. So 23 times 23 is 529. And 28 squared, 28 times 28 is 784. I have to get the b by itself, so we're going to subtract the 529. It's already in my calculator, so I just hit minus 529, and that gets me b squared equals 255. Again, don't forget that the b is squared, so we don't have the variable by itself just yet. To unsquare it, we have to use a square root. So that's going to get me b equals 15.968. And it wants me to round to the nearest tenth. So in this case, I'm going to look behind it. This number, it is 5 or bigger, which means the 9 becomes a 10, which means then I have to also change this to a 16, right? Because that would become a 0. And then I got to include that extra 1 over here. So it's just going to become 16. Or you can think about it as 15.9, 1 more becomes 16.0. And again, it's inches, so put IN, and there we are. So I'm going to do one more with you. It looks like all of these are giving me the hypotenuse and a leg, but if you come across some that don't, just be careful. This one gives me the drawing, so we have to identify which one is the hypotenuse. And it also tells us find the missing side, right? So we need to know are we finding a leg or are we finding a hypotenuse? So your longest side is this one. And if you're questioning it, it's straight across from that 90-degree angle is always going to be your hypotenuse, which is your c squared. So we're going to have 7 squared plus b squared equals 41 squared. 7 squared, hopefully you know, is 49 because 7 times 7. And then I'm going to put 41 squared in my calculator. 41 times 41 gets me 1,681. Got to get the b by itself by subtracting 49. So subtraction property of equality gets me b squared equals 1632. And again, b is not by itself yet. It's squared. The inverse of that, the opposite, is a square root. So we square root that bad boy, and it gets us b equals 40.398. And it wants to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to look at the place behind it. That is 5 or bigger. So the 3 becomes a 4. So it is 40.4 meters. Okay, so hopefully that helps. If you need more help, let me know. Other than that, 10 points, get more math.